So it was 1993, and my family had moved to France for a sabbatical year to Pau, which is a beautiful city in the southwest that has a panoramic view of the Pyrenees. It sounds idyllic, but it wasn't all good news. I had to leave a job I loved. My three daughters were going to have to attend French schools because Pau didn't have an international school. And none of us really spoke French. On the plus side, though, because I've moved around so much in my adult years, one of my superpowers is knowing how to settle into a new place. Seriously, I lived in the Ozarks happily for 5 years. My MO involves finding just the right person who will help me connect. And so, as I was dropping my kids off on the first day of school, when I saw a woman wearing jeans and sneakers heading straight towards me, I had a very good feeling. It turned out I was about to cross paths with Penny Engwall, an expat from Scotland and connector extraordinaire. Penny introduced herself and welcomed me to town. She asked me over for a cup of tea and gave me a gazillion tips about how to live in France. And she invited me to attend an event she called a hash. I know it sounds like something that has to do with illegal drugs, but it's not. Hash House Harriers are groups of runners all over the world who describe themselves as drinkers with a running problem. Their beverage of choice is beer, both for drinking and for pouring over their heads at the end of the hash. And here's how it all works. The organizer of the hash is known as the hare, and that person sets a trail, usually in the woods, using white flour. The rest of the group, which they're known as the hounds, they run the course, giving each other directions by yelling things like false trail and on. Well, the Sunday after I met Penny, my family drove up to the site of the hash where we found this beautiful setting. It was an ancient church that was bordered by woods on one side and a large rolling empty field on the other. The Pau hash was family friendly, and someone would always lead a group of walkers on an unmarked alternate trail. While my oldest daughter, ran the hash with her dad, my two younger daughters and I set off with a few other walkers led by Reuben, who was the hare who had set the hash that day. It was the first time I met Reuben, who told me he had been organizing hashes for years. The plan was for us to meet up with the rest of the runners at the end of our leisurely stroll back at the church. After a while, though, it seemed like we were walking and walking with no end in sight, and alarm bells started to go off in my head. Since I have a terrible sense of direction, I've come to recognize when I'm lost. But I told myself, Reuben had set the hash, he knew the area, he had to know how to get us back to the church. Well, it turns out that Harriers are given nicknames based on some quirky trait. And it wasn't until much later that I learned his nickname was Wrong Way Reuben. I just wish I had known that before I followed him blindly into the woods with two of my babies. Well, after what seemed like forever, we saw the empty field off in the distance and we moved as fast as we could in that direction. When we got to the fence, Reuben said in a very confident voice, "We just need to walk through the field and we'll be back at the church." And so, even after all the aimless wandering, since no one had a better plan and we hadn't learned the whole Wrong Way Reuben thing yet, we followed him like sheep. Each one of us climbed carefully through the wire fence into the field and headed towards the spire of the church that was like barely visible through the trees. And then, all at once, everyone realized that the field wasn't completely empty. There was a gigantic, enraged bull snorting and pawing the ground, a bull who, at least in my mind, was this close to charging us. And the bull wasn't alone. There was also an enraged farmer who was waving a pitchfork and yelling God knows what at us in really angry French. Now, Google says when you are faced with an angry bull, you should walk calmly and not make any sudden movements so as not to piss the bull off even more. But unfortunately, in 1993, we didn't have Google. So every single one of us, without looking back, ran towards the church like bats out of hell. Miraculously, and I still don't know how this happened, we all made it back to the church safe and sound. Now, I'm normally not a beer drinker, but after that very close call, I downed several Amstels at breakneck speed. Well, we continued attending the hashes until we left France the next year. And during that time, no one was irretrievably lost or gored by a bull. And unexpectedly, we became kind of friends with Ruben, who turned out to be a fun guy to hang out with. I just made sure never to follow him anywhere, ever, ever again.